So, ever since the Ecaz faction was added to the classic Dune board game in the recent expansion 3, I've noticed that a lot of people kind of struggle to figure out how to make them work and how to play them strongly. And as a result, they seem to be lower in people's ratings in terms of strength. But I've actually found that is one of the more fun factions to play. And for me personally, I think they're pretty strong too. So I wanted to make this video here to give my insight on everything I've learned in the past few months since they've came out, but also while playtesting them leading up to their release. Now, I'm not really going to go into a big breakdown on all the ins and outs of the faction's abilities. I'll leave that to the designer Jack Rita. He made a really good video a couple days ago. He goes into a lot of depth on the abilities. But for this, what I want to talk about is how to use these abilities to win a game, ideally. Now, House Ecaz, it says on the sheet, you forge strong alliances. And that's really their big thing. A lot of Ecaz wins, more often than not, are going to be while you're allied to someone. Though, hey, a solo win is pretty crazy when it does happen. But it's probably going to be a little tougher than if you're someone like the Ixians or Harkonnen. So to get into a good alliance in Dune, you're really going to need to be in a good position. They're not like the Bene Gesserit where they have the voice and it's such a strong ability that you could be in almost any position and someone would still want to ally with you just to have use of it in their battles. Now, a good position in Dune is going to really focus on three things. You're going to want control over one or two strongholds on the board. That's going to be big because it means that when you do form an alliance, it's going to be very easy for you and your ally to work together to get that fourth stronghold and then hopefully control them and win the same turn you ally. That's one of the easiest ways to win an alliance because it's unpredictable and the table doesn't have a lot of time to chip away at your alliance and work out the weaknesses in it. The other thing is going to be having lots of spice. Spice is it's what makes this game run. It's what gets you cards, it's what gets you forces, and when you got no spice, you're really going to have a hard time winning, unless you're the frontman. And the last thing is going to be you want treachery cards because you're not winning any battles unless you have a good hand of treachery cards, especially as the Ecaz. Now, to get those three things, there's a lot of factions that are really good at focusing on one or two of them, like the Ixians. They start with a stronghold from the beginning, and it's hard for people to take it from them. They're really good at holding on to that stronghold. Or the Emperor and the Guild. They make money just by being in the game, so they're always going to be pretty rich. And lastly, of course, you've got the Atreides, who gets to see what cards are going up for bid, which means at any given moment, they're probably going to have one of the strongest hands at the table. The Ecaz, they don't really have strengths in getting one particular one of those aspects, but really they have a lot of versatility in their ambassador tokens. They're able to adapt to a wide variety of situations, and all three of those points are covered by at least one of these tokens. And so that's why I think they're really good at, on the average game, getting themselves into a good position to ally. And the best part is, they don't have to wait for a nexus to form an alliance. They can use their Ecaz ambassador token. Now, the ambassador tokens are a little bit complicated, so I'll just quickly explain how they work. At the start of the game, you're going to get one, the Ecaz ambassador, which you'll always have either available to you or deployed out on the board somewhere. You always have this one. And in addition to that, you'll have 5 random tokens, like this, for example. And then there are 5 others representing the other factions that are in the game. And you'll note that the Mauritani are conspicuously missing because, well, they don't get along with each other too well. Now, these tokens, they all provide really good effects. Some of them, like the Tleilaxu, the Ixian, the Harkonnen, and the Chom ambassador, are a little bit more niche in the sense that they're not always good. Whereas these six here are just generally really great to have available to you at any given moment. One of the toughest parts about playing Ecaz well is looking at what five you happen to have available to you and thinking, okay, what order do I want to put these down in, and where do I want to put them down? So I'm going to focus first on these six ones here, which are great to have at any given time. So the first one is the Richesse token, and this one just simply lets them pay 3 spice to the bank, and you get the top card off the treachery deck. And this is just really great. Obviously not if your hand is full, but 3 spice is a really good price to get a treachery card for. And unless you've got an Ixian player who's constantly putting bad cards on the top of the deck, you're probably going to be getting something good out of this. Hopefully not a worthless card, because that would suck, but overall, this is a great token to have, especially on the first turn of the game. This is going to be really helpful, because it means you can save some of your starting spice. You don't have to go trying to bid 4 or 5 to get a card. You can just put this down somewhere and hope someone triggers it, or even toss someone a spice to trigger it for you. The next one is going to be the Fremen token, and this one lets you move a group of forces on the board to any other territory on the board, and that even includes the Ixian Hidden Mobile Stronghold. It's kind of like a worm ride or like a guild cross shipment. Now, this is really good because the worst part of Dune is if you have some forces stranded somewhere. You know, maybe you use your Ornithopters to get out to collect a spice blow, and then for whatever reason, you moved out of the city, you don't have those Thopters anymore, and now your guys are stranded out in the desert. This is going to help you get them back into the action, but it's also going to give you a second movement on your turn, effectively. Normally, you only get 1 shipment and 1 movement, and that kind of translates to, on a turn, the best case scenario is you could ship to 1 stronghold and move to another. So this, if someone triggers this, you could have 1 shipment, 1 movement, and then another movement to another stronghold. That's letting you contest 3, which is enough to be winning solo, or with your special victory condition if you co-occupy those 3 with your ally. The next one is the Guild Ambassador. This one is going to let you ship 4 forces for free to any territory. Again, there's a key word on this, which is send those forces, not ship them. So this means that you could also put these into the Ixian Hidden Mobile Stronghold, which is just another great layer of unpredictability. You never really know quite what the Ecaz are going to do, and that helps you have an advantage over other people. Just like the Fremen one, this is an extra action in the shipment movement phase, except this one is an extra shipment. And the only real limiting factor here is that it's only up to 4 forces. You know, in theory, you could use the Fremen ambassador to move all 20 forces if they happen to be in 1 territory, but that's kind of rare. But with only 4, you're going to have to be targeting someone preferably who's only got a handful of forces in a stronghold, and they've already taken their turn, so they won't have the chance to react to you. Next up is the Atreides token, and when this one gets triggered, this one's a little bit different from the others. This one is going to affect the triggering faction in a negative way, which most tokens don't. This one is going to let you see that faction's entire hand of treachery cards, which is great because this offers something you very rarely get in Dune, which is certainty. You trigger the Atreides ambassador and you know with 100% certainty what cards they have in their hand. Now, of course, at most tables, you're probably not going to be able to take notes on that, but if you can capitalize on that information on the same turn when it's still fresh in your memory, you could take advantage of it and get some easy battles. You know, unless there's a traitor call, you're going to win that fight. That's really good for when you're going for the win, and it's especially good if the faction that triggering it doesn't move out of a stronghold, so you can still go and fight them and take advantage of that information. Next up is the Bene Gesserit token. This one's also a little bit weird in that it doesn't have a specific effect. What it's going to let you do is it's going to let you trigger any of the tokens that are unavailable. So let's say that the Emperor token's not here, and these are the 6 that I have available to use. If BG token is somewhere out on the board and someone triggers it, I could use any one of these abilities of my choice, and I choose when it's triggered, and then the BG token is going to go away, removed from the game for the rest of the game. But it's very strong, and it's very good, especially if you can grab it in the first turn. Well, not if you can. If it happens to come up in the first turn randomly, because that means that if you didn't get a token you really wanted to have, like the Fremen one or the Richesse one, you've got the BG token, so that means you can just use it anyway. And last one is the Emperor Ambassador token. This one's really simple. It just gives you 5 spice from the spice bank. And that's good. You don't really need to say much more about it. It's very useful, and there's never a moment in the game where 5 more spice can't hurt. You know, unless you're allied to the Emperor, but that's pretty thematic if you think about it. So these 6 tokens here are always good to have. They're really good if they're part of your starting randomized pool of ambassador tokens, and these are the ones that you want to be putting out first. Since it costs spice to place these, 1 for the first one, 2 for the second, 3 for the third, etc., each turn, you want to be prioritizing which ones go out first. And these are going to be the ones. They're always good, and you don't have to worry about a niche case that makes them more effective. Now, the other tokens here, they are all good in their own ways, but there are certain circumstances where it's just going to be the case where you don't really need to use the effect. You might put it out and it gets triggered, and you might not even choose to use it. So the first one of these is the Chome Ambassador, and this one is kind of like the Chome ability or Advanced Trauma. It's going to let you discard treachery cards from your hand and get 3 spice for each. Now, naturally, if you have a good hand, you're not going to want to place this because all of your cards are probably worth more than the 3 spice you'll get. Unless it's really tight and you need extra spice for dialing or shipping, but that's pretty niche. Next up is the Harkonnen Ambassador, and this one's going to let you peek at a random traitor card that the triggering faction holds. This one's similar to the Atreides one, where it's a negative effect for the person who moves or ships into it. Now, one random traitor card that player holds, that's just a side note for the Harkonnen, if you trigger this with the BG token, and the Tleilaxu, who all hold more than one traitor card. So this does offer good certainty against most factions, because everyone's going to have one, so it's essentially just see that person's traitor. However, Ecaz, for various reasons, I don't feel you really have to worry about traitors that much. And I will touch upon that later, but for that reason, I find this token a little bit more niche than the Atreides one, because seeing someone's cards is always useful. Next up is, oh, and I should mention that this token can be good if you want to see that information and then try to sell it to people. Like, oh, I know that X faction has your traitor. You give me a couple spice and I'll tell you which one. But it's a bit tough to sell, since just offering that deal to someone implies that their traitor is held by one specific faction and they might be a little more safe against others. But deals are they're very different across different tables, depending on who's playing. Next up is the Tleilaxu token. This one's going to let you get revive 1 leader or 4 of your forces for free. Now, this is great in a bad scenario, which is you've lost a lot of forces or you've lost a really good leader. But if you do find yourself in that scenario, this is just a godsend, because otherwise you'd have to worry about paying the Tleilaxu a ridiculous amount of money or giving them a really good deal to revive your leader. and or hoping for the Gola card, which is, I mean, with the full deck, it's a 1 in 50 chance of grabbing that card. So this token, really good when you need it, but really bad when you don't. And then the last one here, this is probably the best of these more niche tokens, is the Ixion one, which lets you discard one of your Treachery cards to draw the top card of the Treachery deck. Now, this one's a little bit in a similar vein as the Chome token, where you can get cards out of your hand, and this one compensates you with a new card, which is hopefully better, but God, it's horrible when you discard, you know, a duplicate defense or something, and then you just get a worthless card. So for that reason, you're not always going to want to place this one down. Now, the great part about these tokens, especially on the first turn, is that you place them at the end of the revival phase. So on that first turn, a good chunk of the game has happened, including the bidding phase. So if you're thinking about putting down the Chome or the Ixion or the Richesse Ambassador to get some to deal with your hand of treachery cards, you're gonna already know what you have. So if you've seen you bought a card for 5 spice and it was worthless, you're probably gonna want to stick down one of these two. Or if in the bidding phase, for whatever reason, you just kept on getting upbid and you couldn't get a card for a decent price, you're going to know that, and you're going to be able to stick down the Richesse token first turn to mitigate that scenario. So that's just one example of how good Ecaz are at mitigating bad scenarios that you could very easily find yourself in Dune at, you know, minimal fault to your own. You could always argue that any bad situation you find yourself in, you got a bit of blame to hold. But honestly, you think about your Harkonnen in the first turn, you go out to collect some spice, and someone calls Fate a traitor. Yeah, you were the one who made the choice, but still, it doesn't feel entirely within your control. And Harkonnen especially is going to suffer later on with the game, not having the biggest leader, and also losing a battle in the first turn. Ecaz, you know, you could put out the Tleilaxu token to get your leader back. You could put out the Richesse token to buy another card to replace the ones you probably lost. You could do all sorts of things. You could put out the Emperor token to get a bit of spice that you were wanting to collect from a spice blow. They're very good at mitigating bad situations you could find yourself in. And all of those bad situations are going to tie into those 3 main points of being in a good position to get an alliance, which is going to be, you know, you lost a fight and now you're not controlling a stronghold, or you lost a fight and now you have less treachery cards in your hands. You lost all your good ones. Or again, you lost a fight and now you can't collect spice and you're on Chome Charity. I mean, nobody's going to ally with someone that just collected Chome Charity. It'd be crazy. So the other thing that I think Ecaz really has going for them, especially in terms of versatility, is their starting position on the board. So what they're going to get is they're going to get 6 forces here in the Imperial Basin, and you've got 3 choices of where you want to put them. It's really doesn't make a huge difference. I like to put them here, but that's just because I'm crazy. But this spot, while it's not a stronghold, I think it's the next best thing, and arguably in some circumstances, maybe even better than having a stronghold. So, first of all, you are within 1 space of the 2 main cities. These are like the best strongholds to control, and also the polar sink. So, judging by the way your first turn goes, you know, if you've gotten any good cards from your starting draw or from the bidding phase, if you triggered some tokens because you're going last and you got some good benefits, if you're feeling like you're in a good spot, you could just walk into one of these 2 cities. It'll be made a lot easier if one of them's empty because there's no Harkonnen or Atreides. That's a really good move you could do. Or if you bought a bad card and maybe you're going first and none of your tokens have triggered yet, maybe you want to play it safe and you just go into the polar sink. That's fantastic because now you're safe. You can't really get screwed over on the first turn like another faction can. I mean, think about if you spawn in Siege Tabard like the Fremen do, and you don't have that double movement. someone comes to fight you and you don't want to take that fight, your choice is going to be moving out into the rock. And now you're in kind of a bad spot to be. But with Ecaz, if you don't like where you're at in the first turn, you can just be in the polar sink. It's safe. You can bide your time and wait until you've triggered some tokens, bought some cards, and you're feeling like you can go and take on a stronghold and get yourself right out onto the board. The other thing, though, is if you think about this spot here, let's say on your first turn you go and you spend a spice or two and you ship in to one of these strongholds. Now you've got ornithopters. Now you can move 3 spaces away. And now look at this. You get into Tabber if it looks good. We could get into 2x Siege if it looks good. And there's a bunch of spice blows around here that are within 3 territories of Imperial Basin, which means if you don't want to go for the stronghold, you can go collect some spice. It's a really great spot to be in. And best part yet is it's safe from the storm because of this dotted line on the edge here, which probably took many people months to learn, or maybe you're learning it right now. But yeah, the Imperial Basin is safe from the storm until atomics are played. So unless you get a worm, you know, the Fremen pull multiple worms from the spice deck and they get to place one of them. They could stick it here and eat your forces, but barring that, these guys are pretty safe. Now, on a real niche case, let's say you've used the guild token or the Fremen token and they trigger, and maybe the guild one goes off and you put 4 forces in another siege. You use your shipment to get into Carthag, and then you use your movement to get into 2x Siege or Arakeen. Now, this is crazy. You're contesting 3 strongholds on the first turn. This is something that only the Harkonnen and the Ixians can do reliably. And you were here as the Ecaz. You just triggered a token, and now you're in this position. Same thing with the Fremen, except instead of shipping those forces, you could move half of them with it, and then again, use your movement to get over here. So there's a lot of versatility in what you want to do with your first turn. Now, you look at their starting spice and you look at their starting forces. That's 6 forces and 12 spice. That gets you up to an 18 spice value in your starting position. And that is only just below the Atreides and Harkonnen, who have 10 forces on board and 10 spice, which is 20. A lot of factions are very far below this. You think about the guild, they have 10 because they start in 2x with 5 forces and they have 5 spice. Or you look at the Fremen, they've got 13, which is their 3 spice and their 10 forces spread across the board. I mean, it gets as bad as Rishas, where they start with 5 spice and no forces on the board. So having this 18 value of starting position, very good. It's very strong. And having that extra 2 spice over 10 that a lot of factions have means that you can be paying for your ambassador tokens and still have a good amount of spice left over for shipping and buying cards. Now, I want to give a little bit of focus to their leader setup and their likelihood of getting traded. So for one thing, in the advanced game, you've got this loyalty ability where at the start of the game, you're going to shuffle your traders and pick one that, ooh, that's rough. Let's just do some revisionist history. There we go. And you're going to pick one that never gets added to the treachery deck. That's fantastic because not only is Sonya Ecaz here not going to be a traitor to anyone, but she's also never going to be a face dancer. So that's just perfect. The other thing is, if you look at their spread of leaders here, it looks kind of lackluster. I mean, their highest is a 4, and they've got a 2 as their weakest. It's not great. But the other thing is that 4 of their leaders are pretty decent numbers. 4s and 3s, those are good. I mean, it's perfectly viable to be winning battles with leaders like these. And they comprise most of their faction. Best part is that there's no standout leader like Fade Rautha or Stilgar or Hasmir Fenring, where they're their faction's strongest leader. And especially in the case of Harkonnen, you look at Fate is their strongest, he's a 6, and Raban is next up, he's a 4. The difference between that is 2 whole power, whereas their 2 strongest are 4s, and their next 2 strongest are 3s. Not a lot of difference. If I got an Ecaz trader in my pile at the start of the game, I would have to have some pretty bad other options to choose the Ecaz leader. They're just not a great pick for calling traders. Combine that with the fact that, oh, I should have grabbed this earlier. Combine that with the fact that they have Duke Vidal, who is a 6th leader. That's once again, I'm going to make it less likely that your trader is the one they choose to play in the battle. But also he's 6 strength, and he's completely untraderable. He's got no trader card in the deck whatsoever. He'll never turn trader. He'll never turn face dancer. Perfectly safe. I mean, that's another big reason why not to pick Ecaz as a trader. They're kind of like the Atreides in that respect, because of their Kwisatz Haderach that prevents trader calls. So this makes it very likely that you're going to go a whole game without getting called trader once. And that's going to be most of your games, I think. Unless, of course, someone hears me say this and then deliberately picks Ecaz traders. But if that works out for them, you know what? They deserve my respect. So once you've done this and you've gotten yourself into a good position, you've got a stronghold or 2, you've got a decent amount of spice, and you got 3 or 4 cards in your hand, once you get into that good position, you want to get into alliance. Now, for that, you've got 2 things. You've got the normal, a worm comes up during the spice blow phase, and there's a nexus. But you've also got your Ecaz ambassador token. This is how you're going to gain access to Duke Vidal, but it's also how you're going to be able to get into an alliance with any other solo faction outside of a nexus phase. So some people might even decide to put this down on the first turn and try to get into an early alliance when everyone's kind of on an equal footing, and just the fact that you're the only option makes you more likely for someone to accept your request to ally. But I think it's better to hold this, bide your time for a turn or 2, wait until maybe turn 3 or 4 and see who's looking in a good spot, and then you pop the question and you ask if they want to ally with you, get them to ship in, and there you go. You're together, and with any luck, there hasn't been a nexus yet, in which case you're the only alliance at the table, which is going to be a huge boon for your strength. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to hold strongholds, and it's going to make it harder for people to work together and attack you. Now, the other thing that's going to make it real tough to attack you is this occupy ability. So let's say that we've got the Ecaz here, and they're allied with the Atreides, just as God intended. Perfectly canon. Let's say you're allied with Atreides. The occupy ability lets you both be in the same territory, which is typically against the rules. So you can do crazy things, like have 5 of your forces and 5 of their forces in a stronghold. That's 10 total, and you're each only using 25% of your total reserves. That's a lot of strength. It's going to be real tough for anyone to work up the courage to even attack you. Now, the way that battling works when you're co-occupied is, at the start of the battle, you're going to choose which of you is fighting it. So you're going to choose who's playing the leader, who's playing the cards, who's spending spice if you're playing advance, and then that is the person fighting the battle. No matter who that happens to be, the allies' forces are the ones that are always going to be dialed and lost. The Ecaz forces are going to be lost, half of them rounded up to the tanks, and that much power is going to be added to your dial. So in this case, where there's 5 Ecaz forces, half of 5 rounded up is 3. So no matter what you or the Atreides dial, you're going to be adding 3 guaranteed to your battle plan, and you won't need spice to power these guys up if you're an advanced. That's good. It can be tough when someone just sends 1 force, and now, you know, let's say you've got a ridiculous amount, you've got 9 Ecaz forces somewhere. All someone has to do is send 1 force in, and now automatically 5 of these guys are going to die, and realistically, you probably didn't need that that number added to your dial. That kind of sucks, but that encourages you not to doomstack strongholds as Ecaz. The other thing is that because you choose who's going to fight the battle, you get to choose whose hand of cards is better to fight it. Now, this is actually a great reason why you might want to be allied with the Atreides as Ecaz, because they can look at the hand of the person who they're fighting. You know, of course, they'll be taking notes on the cards they buy. They can look at your hand and their own and say, you know what, I think you're going to be better at fighting this battle. You should take it. Or, hey, you know what, I've got this card. They can't counter it, so I should fight this one. That's such a huge amount of flexibility because there's countless times where you'll be allied with someone and they just happen to have the card that you needed to win the fight and win the game. And unless you're Chom, who can trade cards with your ally, or unless you're the Ixians, who can kind of finagle things to get a card in their hand to their ally, there's really no way around this unless you happen to be Ecaz, because you choose who fights the battle. It's perfect. It's really flexible. It's really versatile. And that's really the name of the Ecaz game. That's their biggest strength, is that versatility, is that flexibility. If either of you would win that fight, you could pick that person and they can win it. And there's also the Ecaz special victory condition, which is if you and your ally co-occupy 3 strongholds, you only need those 3 to win the game, which is, lower than the normal 4. That's good in 2 ways, because not only is it less battles you have to win, if people are fighting you in every stronghold, that's going to be 3 battles you have to win instead of 4. Your forces, ideally, are going to be more dense. If you take 20 forces split up between 4 strongholds, that's going to be 5 in each. But if it's 3, that's going to be 6 or 7 in each, which is really good. That's a nice boon. If you're going for the win, people are likely going to be fighting larger stacks of forces, which means it's going to be easier for you to pull off that win. The other thing, though, is one of the hardest parts about going for a win is actually getting into those strongholds. A lot of times you might not have the movement to do it, or you might be going later in the turn order and people block strongholds for you, against you rather. That's going to end a win attempt before it even starts. But with this, let's say we have this board state here. Let's say Atreides is going first. They can ship in here, and then on my turn I can ship in there. Now, let's say that we were a normal alliance and we needed to get this 4th stronghold. All someone might do is player A ships in here, player B ships in there, and now it's locked. But if you've got the Atreides in there and you're Ecaz and you're going last, it is impossible for you to be blocked out of the stronghold because you can co-occupy your allies' territories. So you can ship in there even if someone was already. That's great. It makes it a lot easier to go for those win attempts, and it makes it more likely for you to win those attempts when you do go for them. And then there is one last thing, which is this collection ability. It looks at first just like a clarification of who gets the spice when you're co-occupied for those territories that give you a spice income, like Carthage, Arrakeen, and Tuix. But this is actually really nice, because if you look at the cities here, normally you're going to get 2 spice when you control it. But if you're both co-occupied, you're each getting 2. And that's a net bonus of 4 spice for the alliance. That's pretty good. Depending on the economy of the table, how rich and how poor people are, that's a potential free card that you're able to buy just with that 4 spice you're getting together. One of you subsidizes the other's bid, and then there you go. That's a free card. And it's just nice to get a little bit of extra spice when you need it. Sometimes you just 0.5 off of winning a fight and you needed 1 more spice, you could dial and win the tie, and that ability might just give it to you. Now, their alliance ability may not seem too great at first, but this is really awesome because all of that flexibility that I was talking about at the start where you may not get good cards, so you can use the Chome or Ixion or Rishis Ambassador, or hey, you lost a good leader, so you can use the Tleilaxu Ambassador. All this versatility you have in coming back from bad situations is now also granted to your ally. So maybe you go for a win attempt and it fails, but luckily you didn't lose too much. You only lost a leader, you only lost one card. You can offer these abilities to your ally when they get triggered, and now you can recoup from that loss really easily, a lot faster than most alliances might be able to. Now, if you think about it, if you were allied with the Tleilaxu, obviously it's going to be easier to revive leaders and forces if you're allied to them. Or the Emperor, obviously it's going to be easier to get cards back. Or Chome, it's going to be easier to get spice back. But those alliances might not help with the other situations that they're not so good in. But the Ecaz one is pretty good in all of them. There's the saying, jack of all trades but master of none. In Dune, though, with the huge diversity of potential games that could happen, being a jack of all trades is fantastic, because you never know when you're going to get put in the one situation where your faction just really doesn't work out well, and you'll be out of luck. But at least with Ecaz, you'll always have a bit of a fighting chance. And that's why I think that Ecaz is really one of the most fun factions. They're not the best, but they are quite competitive, and they're just very interesting to theorize on what moves to make, what scenarios. I've got this starting pool of these ambassadors. Where should I put them? What order? It's a lot to think about, and it's a very fresh idea in terms of factions, in my opinion, for this game. And so that's why I love this faction, and I think you should try them out too. If you want to see me play them, I do have a video on my channel, an invitational for this game where I ended up playing the Ecaz, and I won't spoil how that game ended in case you're curious. But if you want to see me play this faction and utilize these strategies that I just talked about, you can watch that video. I'll have it linked in the description. And if you'd like to see me break down other factions in a similar way, I love this game. I've played it a ton, and I could probably make a similar video on any faction, except the Harkonnen. I've really never figured them out. But if you want to see something like that, by all means suggest it. And otherwise, that's all I got for now.